Now that you have learned a little bit about types of offensive formations and what constitutes an illegal alignment, let's look at some examples of serve-receive alignments and potential alignment violations. What you will see in these slides are only samples of common alignments that many teams use. This is not an exhaustive list of all possible alignments. Teams can be very creative with alignment on the court. It is only our job to make sure their creativity is within the bounds of the rules. We will look at a 5-1 formation in these examples. At the beginning of the set, the R2 checks the players on the court against the team's submitted lineup. Player number 12 is the first server and begins in position 1, or right back. Player number 6 is in position 2, or right front, followed by player number 3, number 4, number 8, and number 10. When the lineup has been verified, the R2 authorizes the libero to enter the game. The libero, in teal, takes the place of number 8. It is very important to understand the idea of what role each player on the floor has. First, there is the setter. The setter's role is to make the second team contact to help run the offense, and the setter's target position is usually in the front row about 10 feet off the right sideline. 3 rotations away from the setter is the opposite side hitter, also known as the right side hitter. There are 2 left side or outside hitters who will likely be 3 rotations away from each other on the court. Lastly, there will be 2 middle hitters or middle blockers. It is not uncommon for the libero to play 3 rotations away from the middle hitter in the front row. Players who are 3 rotational positions from each other on the court are said to be opposite each other on the court. Players who are immediately in front of, behind, or next to each other on the court are said to be adjacent players. For example, in this picture, the libero is opposite to the middle hitter standing in position 2, and adjacent to both the opposite hitter or right side hitter in position 4, as well as the outside hitter in position 6. While watching warm-ups, both officials should pay attention to which players are warming up as setters and which players are hitting from the outside, middle, and right sides of the court. For the duration of these examples, player number 12, currently in position 1, is the setter. Because the setter, number 12, is typically responsible for taking the second team contact, it is to the team's advantage to move the setter out of the way of the oncoming served ball. This is usually the primary objective of serve-receive patterns. Before the contact for service, players must be aligned correctly with their adjacent players. One option the setter has is to get out of the way by moving up to the net. She may not move closer to the center line than the front foot of number 6. This leaves a gap on the floor, and other players will move to fill in the gap. The second objective of serve-receive patterns is to put the best passers in position to make the first play on the ball. Most often, the best passers on the team are the libero, any defensive specialists who play only in the back row, and the outside hitters. Middle hitters and right side or opposite hitters are not as often used as primary passers. One option the team has to fill in the gap is to move player number 3, an outside hitter, back to position 1 on the court. This movement creates 2 potential alignment fault situations the referee must watch for. Player number 3 cannot be closer to the right sideline than her adjacent player number 6. Also, player number 10 may not be closer to the center line than the adjacent player in front of her, player number 3. We would say here that player number 3 has to be to the left of number 6 and in front of number 10. In this instance, the setter also has the opportunity to pinch in on the court. She is not allowed to cross the center back player number 10, but she may move over to be closer to the target's passing spot, as long as she does not cross the player to her left, number 10, or in front of player number 6. Another possibility for this rotation is that the back row players move to the right across the court. This will leave an opening on the left side of the court, which can be filled in either by player number 4 or player number 3. If player number 3 moves back to pass, she must still stay in front of player number 10. There is also an increased potential for overlap between the setter, number 12, and the adjacent player to her left, number 10. After one loss of rally, the setter rotates to center back. The libero must rotate off the court and be replaced by the same player she replaced previously, player number 8. The libero will eventually return to the court, likely for the other middle, player number 6. The most common maneuver here is to move the setter toward the net. This is usually called pulling up. We might say here that the setter is pulling up player number 4. Once again, the setter cannot be closer to the center line than the player directly in front of her, player number 4. The team can swing their front row players from the left or from the right to fill in the gap. If they want their outside hitters, number 3 and number 10, to be primary passers, then they'll probably swing from the right so that player number 3 can drop back to pass. Two new possibilities for overlap have been created. The libero must remain to the right of the setter, and player number 3 must remain in front of the libero. Up next, the setter will rotate to left back. Once again, to get the setter out of the way of the passers, she may move up to the net, pulling up player number 10. Watch for a potential front-to-back overlap between these two players. The team can swing from the right and have player number 4 drop back to pass. Two new possibilities for overlap are created. A side-to-side overlap between the libero and the setter, and a front-to-back overlap between player number 3 and player number 4. Alternatively, if the team wants player number 10, who is currently trapped at the net by the setter, to continue being a primary passer, they could have player number 10 drop back to pass. If this happens, she must bring the setter with her, since the setter cannot line up closer to the center line than player number 10. When a team isn't passing well, they may make adjustments on the fly that the R2 must be able to follow and assess for illegal alignments. If the coach, in haste, told number 10 to drop back and for the rest of the players to swing right, pushing player number 4 back up to the net, a front-to-back illegal alignment would occur if the setter didn't move with player number 10. To keep from having an illegal alignment, the setter must drop back behind player number 10. If a team is running a 6-2 formation, at this point you would see two substitutions happen. Player number 12 would be replaced by a new opposite or right side hitter, and player number 4 would be replaced by a new setter who would move across the back row. Likely, the same rotation patterns would occur as the last three you just saw. However, in the 5-1 formation, the setter plays across the front row. The objectives in creating a serve-receive pattern are still the same. Keep the setter out of the way and as close to the target position as possible, and use the best passers in each formation. Since the setter is already out of the back row, she likely won't move much. However, the passers may move around to achieve the best configuration they can. The outside hitters, player number 3 and player number 10, are likely to be found among the primary passers along with the libero. In this configuration, the team would probably drop player number 10 back to pass and hide player number 4 behind the passing line. Player number 10 can drop back into the right, which creates two possibilities for overlap. A front-to-back overlap between player number 10 and player number 3, or a side-to-side overlap between player number 10 and player number 8. This movement has also bought the setter some room to pinch in on the court and move closer to the target passing area. She can move over as far as player number 10. This puts all three front row players in a tight side-to-side formation that the R2 must be watching closely. In the next rotation, the libero must be replaced by player number 6. Eventually, the libero will return to the floor for player number 8. In this position, the setter is very close to the target position and may not have to move much at all. The team will probably hide player number 4 again and try to get their outside hitter, number 10, back to pass. Once again, a possible front-to-back overlap will exist between player number 10 and the person directly behind her, the libero. Another possible overlap actually exists with player number 4, who is hiding in the back. It is not uncommon for the player who is hiding not to pay attention to where they are on the court. Be sure here that the center back player is between the two other back row players. If player number 4 hides on the wrong side of the libero, a side-to-side illegal alignment exists. In the last rotation, the setter is already standing very near the target spot. Once again, to get the primary passers, number 3 and number 10, and the libero in place, player number 3 will drop back and number 4 will hide. There isn't a strong likelihood of overlapping here unless the team is forced to make some changes to increase their ability to pass the ball. If needed, player number 4 could step in to pass and take the place of another player who is having difficulty. If that occurs, then watch out for a possible front-to-back overlap between player number 4 and player number 3. Recognizing alignment faults is one of the trickiest parts of being a volleyball referee. Although the rules are black and white, the strategies employed and the way each official handles alignment issues is definitely an art. First and foremost, find a system that works for you. Some officials remember pairs of opposites, like the setter and her opposite or the captain and her opposite. Some memorize the lineup with the 6 player numbers in order and recall that at the beginning of each play. Others use physical characteristics, like remembering that the girl with black hair comes before the girl with the knee brace in the serving order. Remember that your view of the court is not the same as the view you've had in these slides. You don't get an overhead view or a view from the back court. Your side-on view as the R2 can distort your angle. Don't maneuver yourself far off center to try to get the best angle on what might be an alignment fault. If it's not obvious from where you are, it's not obvious enough. Call the alignment faults that are obvious, and if players are close to an alignment fault, use warnings to keep the team in check. If the team chooses to ignore your warning, then you should call the fault. For many officials who are just beginning to learn how to track alignment faults, the setter becomes the primary focus. Although the setter can be the cause for possible alignment faults much of the time, don't get tunnel vision and don't only focus on whether the setter is moving before the contact for service. Keep your vision broad and look for other alignment faults as well. The possibilities for alignment faults are as infinite as the team's imaginations in creating their roles on the court and their serve-receive patterns. Many teams choose formations different from what has been presented here. The best way to identify alignment faults is to keep watching matches and studying the game. This concludes the lesson on alignment. Please mark this lesson complete and continue on to back row. Thank you.